Anyone make it to any of the parties last night? No? I wish I hadn't. Oh. Shall we?
Yeah, I'm ready when you are.
Okay. So welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for coming along. We're from Atmail. We are a white label email provider to telcos and service providers. Very pleased to be here at OpenStack Summit this year. This is one of several presentations that we've given. Certainly like to thank the organizers for this opportunity to be able to present to you today. My name is Jay Sill. I'm the Sales Director for Europe, based out of London. With me is my colleague, who is our Global Solution Architect, Jason Brown, known to his friends as JB. So you have Jay and JB. So welcome, everyone. And what we are going to do today is to talk about why we chose OpenStack, where we are in our journey, how far we've come, some of the issues and challenges we've overcome, as well as a little bit touching on what we're going to do in the future. So to begin, hopefully we've got an agenda that's fairly self-explanatory. I want to just touch briefly on who we are as Atmail. As I said, we're a white label email company, but probably not a name that you've heard of, because we're the brand behind the brand. You've probably heard of our customers, maybe not of us. I want to talk about why email is important. I've had all kinds of things thrown at me over the years. Email, I thought you were dead. You know, that's really nice to hear. Why we're moving email to the cloud, what are the drivers behind that? Mainly commercial as well as technical, so hopefully you will get something out of it today that appeases both camps. I'll then hand over to JB to talk about the architecture, both old and new, and where we are in our journey, why we chose OpenStack, and some of the technical drivers behind it. As I say, where we are in our journey, what lessons we've learned. And if I could ask you to hold questions until the end, there will be a chance to ask questions and a Q&A at the end. I can see a few people nodding in the audience, so hopefully we've got some good questions coming along, JB. No pressure, guys, by the way. Okay, so to begin, who is Atmail? Well, so it's, as it says there in the top left, we're a leader in white label emailing. What that means is that we are the brand behind the brand. So a lot of the telcos and ISPs that we service provide email to their end user subscriber base, but the email behind it is us. They may not advertise that fact, but it is probably us. Now, we've been going for about 20 years. We were one of the first to pioneer the use of webmail way back in 1998. We have about 170 million mailboxes out there in the wild at the moment, and we operate in more than 90 countries with our customer base, both with on-premise and with our cloud solution that we've had now on OpenStack for a few years. You can also see there, as I was saying, you know, the brand behind the brand, some of the names that we service and provide solutions to. So Optus is one of the largest providers in Australia for broadband internet, etc. We have a partnership here in the US with DreamHost, and we've got a DreamHost member here with us today. In fact, if any of you made the OpenStack presentation in Sydney last year, we actually co-presented with DreamHost. Singtel in Singapore, and a couple of others. I haven't put up everything on that slide. Some of them don't like to talk about what they're using as a solution, even though it's OpenStack and we're meant to be open. They'd like to preserve their reputation, brand, etc., by not giving too much away. They want to be seen as the forefront, not the vendor that's providing them. So in our consideration for moving to OpenStack, what you can hopefully see from here is that we have 20 years of history, 20 years of servicing our customers and doing it very well. I mean, as you can see there on one of the bullets or boxes there, we have 99% customer satisfaction rating. And that's something that's very, very precious to us and something that we wanted to preserve moving forward. What you have to appreciate is that we're not a startup. We're not suddenly bringing a new product to market and therefore we can choose any path that we want. We have a lot of history and legacy that we need to be very mindful of and make sure we're bringing that forward in order to service not only our new customers that we're hopefully bringing on, but our existing customers as well. So there were some very major considerations regarding the commercials around why we chose OpenStack. And some of these customers have been loyal to us for many years. So we are very mindful, as I say, not wanting to upset them or lose them on the journey that we're on. So what is it that we do? So as it says here, our vision is to create an exceptional, integrated, personalized, and secure email and user experience that enhances the lives of our customers. Well, what does that mean? Well, for our service provider and telco community, we provide robust solutions that help them mitigate risk, control cost, and improve the user experience. But at the same time, as providing a stable, mature platform, is giving them the ability to monetize that platform, not only to retain their existing user base, but to improve and grow upon that, and to be able to monetize that for the needs of revenue. Now, from the graphic there that you will see that this is common across desktop and mobile, so we provide a generic experience regardless of the form factor that you're coming in on. And finally, a little quote from DreamHost. So, spoiler alert, if you're in suspense about how our OpenStack journey went, whether we were successful or not, well, there's a nice little quote there that says, and for those of you at the back who can't quite read it, it just says that we are fantastic, we're very talented, and we're incredibly good looking. What? So, moving on. Is email important? Oh, come on, we're an email company. Of course we were going to go there. So, it's interesting. I mean, we've had a very high-profile case in recent years that has really highlighted the importance of email, I guess. You know, it has had a consequence of changing the political landscape in the US. There's no two ways about it. You know, people still go on about it. But why is it important? Well, so email is part of the fabric. It's not something that you really think about. You know, if I was to use an analogy, I would say compare it to your home. So in your kitchen, you've probably got a tap or faucet for our North American colleagues. Well, you turn it on and you get clean water. You don't give it a second thought. It just works, it happens, that's it. What you're more interested in at home is probably, hey, the latest 4K television, 65-inch, or your surround sound 7.1, or the fact that your dishwasher is internet connected, or you've got IoT or 5G. Those are the things that really gain your interest. No one ever says to you, hey, I've got clean drinking water at home. Same with email. No one in the work environment or personal life goes, hey, I've got email. It just doesn't happen. It's a given. But just like the tap, if it stops working, that's when you notice it. And for those of you that are mail administrators or running email, no one rings you up at the end of the day and says, great job, guys. You did a fantastic service in running email today. Like most things, you don't get the thanks for it. But you'll probably get a senior manager ringing you up, telling you why that service was down on that particular day. And that's more likely the scenario you're going to face. So, is email important? Well, we like to think it is. And most of our customers, when they think about it, would tend to agree with us. So, as I said, you know, we're often faced with, well, isn't email dead? That's the old way of doing things. We wanted to have something new. Well, the reality is, even if today you found something that was going to replace email, it's going to take several years to come to fruition, and email is still important. In fact, I'd go further than that to say that email is growing. We send, on average, about 269 billion email a day. That's actually growing to 333 billion a day, according to analysts. Associated with that is an increase in the number of mailboxes out there. Currently, we have about, I believe, 26 billion, I think it's, sorry, we have 2.6 billion email boxes out there. That's going to go to 3 billion. So we're going to see an increase of about 500 million mailboxes over the next 2 years, according to the analysts. And the analyst in question here is a company called Radicati. Radicati is a very well-known analyst in the messaging and email space. And these are the facts that we're quoting here. In fact, they go on to say that the revenues from email is actually growing. So by 2020, we're going to see a 24% growth in revenue from email, rising to about over $45 billion, as it says there. If you think also about how you use email, well, I would argue that email is your identity. You think about anything that you do online. You shop on Amazon, you log on to eBay, you log on to Facebook for social media, LinkedIn. Your unique identifier is your email. And that's why email is important. And we're going to see an increase in that. Furthermore, what we're seeing in that growth, as I said, it's going to grow by 500 million users over the next few years. That growth is driven by a number of factors. One is emerging markets, where there is an uptake of email. And two, in the more developed countries, such as here in Canada, America, etc., and over in Europe, that's driven by a move from on-premise to cloud solutions. So as I said, we're going to see a growth of about 500 million users. And that was one of the main reasons why we wanted to move into the cloud. We've had, over the last 20 years, on-premise solutions. The last few years, we've also had cloud solutions in order to accommodate our customers' need and to take advantage of that growth that we are seeing. So that's hopefully giving you insight into why cloud and why Atmail chose to move in that direction. But why OpenStack? Well, so our philosophy has been open source for a number of years. And talking to some of you over the last few days, you also have an open source philosophy. We started on that a while ago. Our back end is a solution called Dovecot, which is open source. So we validated very carefully on a technical level as well as a commercial level what our chosen solution should be. Now, recently we've had a revalidation, if you like. We came across a survey run by the Open Email survey company. They went out and scanned 2.1 billion IP addresses, which is about half the IPs out there, I believe. And of those, 3.6 million came back to say, hello, I'm an email server. The graphic on the right shows you the breakdown of those email servers. Now, predominantly, 75% is an open source solution called Dovecot, which is what we use for our backend. So a lot of our customers who use open source often say to me, I wish I'd known about you guys sooner, because you can provide the front end that our open source solution actually needs. So for those of you that are non-email related, and let's be honest, before I started in this industry, I too was an Exchange user because I just considered the business world. I didn't consider the telco ISP world. So all there was Exchange and Google, or G Suite. Exchange up there only has 1.53% of that market. So of the 3.6 million email servers out there, they only found about 1.53% were actually running Exchange. So that gives you an idea of how much open source there is out there. So, hopefully I've given you a brief idea of who Atmail happens to be, what we do, and who we provide service for, i.e. the service and telco community. Why hopefully we move from on-premise to cloud. Let me now hand you over to my colleague, JB, our global solution architect, who will talk in a little bit more detail about the architecture associated behind it, both of the old architecture and perhaps some of the limitations that we were facing before OpenStack, and some of the advantages that we've seen with our new technology moving to a cloud solution based on OpenStack. JB, over to you.
All right. Thanks, Jay. So as Jay said, I'm the solutions architect for Atmail. I've been with Atmail since the early 2000s. And my job has evolved over the years, and now I communicate the technical pieces to the non-technical people and the non-technical pieces to the technical people. And as Jay has said, we've been around since 1998. And, as happens a lot with somebody that has a code base that has been around for such a long time, it's not an easy task to go back in and decide what you need to do with it when you want to make a move like moving to the cloud and moving to OpenStack it. We had to take a couple of steps back and really review our architecture and what we had and what we needed to do with it. So this is what our architecture looked like maybe 10 years ago. And you know, if you're familiar with messaging systems, this is not unfamiliar. And it worked okay. It scaled as we needed it to, but we had a single database that everything relied on, everything communicated with just one database. You know, we had changed it over the years. It had been optimized, and we had, you know, restructured it a little bit. But for the most part, it really kind of needed a refresh and a restructure. Part of the problem with the database that we had was we weren't able to split out our inbound and outbound SMTP traffic, and so that made it it put more of a strain on the SMTP and IMAP servers because we couldn't utilize the spam assassin or couldn't utilize our spam filtering the best way possible. You know, and again, this wasn't terrible. This scaled great. 250,000, 300,000 users, not a problem. If you had a proper storage device or you were running in a virtual environment where you could spin up resources as you needed, you could scale it beyond that. But at some point, there almost always came a conversation as to the cost of scaling that out started to become a problem. And so that really was a big driving factor for us to take that step back and look at our architecture and decide what we needed to do with it. So this is what our architecture looks like today, or a snapshot of it. So we began the review process, you know, that would lead to this, that is going to allow us to scale to, you know, millions of email accounts. We think that this will allow us to scale to as many email accounts as we want. We were able to break the database down into, I think we're running 3 different databases that, you know, that serve smaller, more specialized functions. So we don't have an issue there. And we were able to break down, when we were able to split out the SMTP services, and the way that we did that was we leveraged the network layer for all of the SMTP traffic. You know, we call this a mail routing relay solution, and the real benefit of that is all of the queue. If something goes wrong with one of our systems, the queue isn't backed up necessarily in the SMTP server. So now the queue is backed up at the network layer, and then when that problem is fixed, it's so much faster for the networking to manage that load. And the other advantage of that is it takes the load off of those edge servers, so our customers and end users have a much better user experience, because now they're not waiting for, you know, the SMTP server isn't slow because there's 40,000 emails in a queue someplace. They just get processed as normal as they come in from the mail routing relay. It just turned out to be excuse me, a much better solution. Another advantage of this is because all of the email traffic is seen through this one mini cluster within our cluster, we're able to provide a point for legal intercept. For some of our end users have that as a requirement. You know, and legal intercept isn't new and it's not uncommon, but to provide that in a cloud solution like we're providing isn't as common. And so that turned out to be a big benefit for some of our customers. All right, so the journey and the lessons that we learned along the way, again, this comes back to our decision to take a closer look at the architecture to really look at what we had, so that moving forward, the foundation that we were building this cloud infrastructure on was solid. And we did this a couple of times along the way. When we first decided we wanted to make the change from running on our own bare metal solutions, or we moved to kind of a managed hosted solution where we weren't really managing the bare metal, somebody else was, that was still just not adequate. So that was the first point. And then the next point was when we were able to partner with DreamHost, because when you bring on a partner in that kind of a project, you look at what you've done and then you share with them what you've done. They share their experiences, and then you kind of have to take you take another step back, and it's like, okay, these are the things that we think we were doing right, but given all this new information, we need to change this and this and this. So again, at that point, we had a serious look at our architecture. And then when we decided that we were going to go with OpenStack, was another point where we like, okay, this is a technology we're going to use. Does all of this stuff actually work with this technology? But constantly taking those steps back and reviewing that was just so critical. So that when we did deploy on the OpenStack environment, we just kind of had a better idea of what we were getting ourselves into. And it just said that, that planning process was just huge. But that doesn't mean that we didn't run into any speed bumps or problems along the way. With cloud comes hopefully it allows you the opportunity to do more with automation. And we'd been playing with automation before we wanted to make the move with OpenStack. And so we had a bunch of Perl utilities that we had created in-house to use with Ansible, kind of in the Ansible fashion. And that helped because Ansible's OpenStack module, when we first started, just wasn't quite where we wanted it to be with what we were doing with automation. Over the course of the last couple of years, that's changed quite a bit, and now we're in the process of refactoring a lot of our existing utilities to leverage OpenStack's module for that. We ran into some problems with storage along the way. That there was a weird issue that we came across where when you created an instance, this symlink, this dev disk by ID, just wasn't created when you created the instance and went to attach the volume. But it just happened that the identifier, the volume identifier that OpenStack created, used a good portion of the same, the hex value that was given to the ID, and so we were able to map those across. And then, once it's mapped, it's fine. And the problem actually has gone away. And it was kind of one of those things where it just all of a sudden, it didn't happen a lot to start with, but then it just wasn't a problem. So something was just most likely patched along the way, but that was something that we didn't expect. And then at the beginning, because we started with a small cluster for the storage, there were problems when it had to rebalance just because it was small. As more disks were added to that, you're less, if something happens to a disk, the more disks that are on it, the less likely it is that your data is going to be there and less of a problem, and the faster it's going to rebuild. Again, then these are not issues anymore. And we had problems with our network. There are a tremendous amount of networks involved, and the folks from DreamHost were amazing. with us to help with this, and I think we provided a fairly complicated network that was difficult to debug. You know, you have multiple networks communicating with other multiple networks, and it was really difficult to track down problems when they happened. You know, and then if you do have something, a router goes down or something, the time that it takes to rebuild that, sometimes it would just time out because there's so much information there that has to be recreated that, you know, it just doesn't like it. And so, you know, and they helped us a great deal with that. They increased our time to live with those things, and they moved to a distributed routing solution, which almost completely resolved a lot of those issues. And we changed our networking strategy a little bit, and we'll get to that here in just a second. You know, and then we had trying to decide how we were going to set up the network. You know, we started looking at whether we wanted to have multiple IPs with a single, or multiple interfaces with a single IP per interface, or multiple IPs per interface, and the latter seemed to work much better for us. And then we had some issues with security groups that just, for some reason, just didn't take. You would apply them, and then all of a sudden, you know, nothing would happen. You know, things would stop. You're like, you know, and then you would just reapply the security group, and it would go away. But it was, what the hell was that? You know, and so and again, this is something that I don't know if this is, you know, something that was patched with the network layer or whatever, but that's since gone away as well. And so this is, you know, when I was talking about the network design, this was a huge lesson for us that, you know, a lot of our engineers and architects came from, you know, an old school way of thinking, and, you know, setting up their network topologies with the, you know, the VLANs that looked a lot like, you know, the image on the left, which is great, and, you know, and it does work, you know, but then again, it works up to the point where it doesn't work, and then when it doesn't work, well, what do we do? You know, and so moving to multiple IP addresses with single interfaces, and it really did simplify it this much for us, which made troubleshooting, fixing problems, everything that's related to that so much easier. You know, so, you know, and it's kind of, I think it's kind of interesting because when I started working with atmail, we were written in Perl. And so, you know, with Perl, they oftentimes use the, you know, keep it simple KISS, you know, the keep it simple stupid, I think is what it actually, and this so reflects, you know, that very mindset to just stop and simplify it as much as you possibly can when possible, and it just is so much better. Yeah, so, you know, the other lessons that we learned, you know, again, review your architecture. You know, really, if you're going to make this move, especially with something as complicated as an email solution, a full email solution, you know, take the time up front to make sure that what you have is cloud ready, is cloud friendly, and if it's not, you know, is it something that you can live with, or is it something that you're going to have to mitigate, you rewrite something or change what it's set upon? You know, dedicate sufficient resources. You know, I know that kind of sounds like a no-brainer that you would want to do that, but a lot of the times you think you've done that, and then you get halfway into it and you realize, you know, you've got your engineers that are up for 14-hour stretches at a time, and, you know, it's a strain on everybody. Your product suffers, and your customers could suffer because of that, and that's, you know, that's really the bottom line, is you don't want your end users and your customers to suffer because of the resources you haven't decided to put into it. And test everything, and then test it again, and then test it another time, and then make sure that you understand your failure scenarios. Because again, this is email. This is not a simple, you know, app that's on your phone that tells you the location of an IP address or something like that. This is a tremendously complicated system that you're trying to spin up here. And so think about every place that it could possibly go wrong and how it could possibly go wrong, and at least have something that says, okay, this is what we're going to do if this happens, or what that looks like. And then after you do that, go back and test things again, because it's really that important to do that. And then we were so fortunate to be able to partner with DreamHost, who their mindset and philosophy of business was so similar to ours, where we really believed in open source, we believed in the open source community. How can we leverage that? And to have them as a resource to make this happen, I think we would still be spinning our wheels if we hadn't chose the right partner. Because when it comes down to when you really have a problem and you develop this partnership where your engineers are in a direct chat room with your partner's engineers who are actually maintaining in your infrastructure, and you circumvent that whole the problem you have. We don't have to put in a ticket, and then their first level ticket, well, did you try turning it on and off again? You just circumvent that whole process, and you get somebody that knows what they're doing, that talks to somebody else that knows what they're doing, and the problems get fixed. And sometimes it's a problem on our end, and sometimes it's a problem on their end. And sometimes, we came across problems with OpenStack itself, where we would actually find bugs. But then again, because of our faith in the open source community, we knew who to reach out to. DreamHost knew who to reach out to. It's like, hey, look, we're seeing a problem here. Yep, we just experienced that 6 weeks back. Here's a patch that we use to fix that. Or that's something we haven't come across, and it went to the right people, so that in a matter of weeks there was a solution for that. And that just, again, I can't stress how important that was for us to move forward with this. And so what else are we doing with this? And my feelings on this have actually changed excuse me, a little bit this week. We're still looking at at these things here on the right. We're using Octavia currently, and the load balancing as a service is huge for us. And the monitoring as a service, again, that kind of goes with along with automation. The more that you can see what's happening before it becomes a problem, the easier it is for you to address problems, hopefully before they're big problems. But we're seeing today, or yesterday and Monday, I guess, looking at programs like Zool to really be able to make changes like that and track the changes and have everything tested before it gets pushed into production. I think that there's a huge potential there for some of the way that we make our changes and what we're trying to do. And the Kata program, containers are great. We haven't found a real practical use for them yet with the email solution, just because of the complexity of what we're doing. But there's a big part of that also goes to the security side of things. And with the direction they're going, I think that there could be some ways that we could actually leverage that if we don't have to wrap all this stuff around it to make it secure, which completely negates the point of using, you lose the efficiency of using a container to start with. Again, I think that could be a real benefit to us. All right, and so,
okay.
Yeah, Jay's going to recap here.
Thank you, JB. So we're almost at the end. Time flies when you're having fun. So what we want to do is to allow some time at the end for questions. Just so to summarize, so thank you for that, JB. One thing I wanted to add to that was that our engineers, because we do have we don't have infinite number of engineers. One of the things they really did benefit from, and I hope you guys will see that for yourselves, is the community itself. You know, as JB was saying, the amount of knowledge and information we got back from the community really helped accelerate a lot of our solutions. So, why did we choose OpenStack? Well, it certainly was the right decision for us. And hopefully the talk that JB and I have given today has given you a brief glimpse and insight into the reasons why we chose it, what it's been able to do, not only for us, but for our customers as well. Our choices were really driven by a growing market. In email, yes, I just did say that. You know, as I said, it's going to grow to a point where we're going to see another 500 million mailboxes coming online in the next 2 to 3 years. From our technical part of this presentation, hopefully what you gained from that is that it removed the bottlenecks and some of the limitations within our old architecture. So some of the conversations we've had this week, we've come across people who are struggling with exactly that. One of the assurances we can give you is that OpenStack, because of the nature of the collaboration and the architecture, it is able to scale. And as I said, we have about 170 million mailboxes out there, and we have customers that have very, very large deployments, as well as some very small ones. So we know it scales. So it allowed us to fulfill the needs of our global customers, as I say, not only technically, but commercially as well. It's helped to reduce or control some of our cost base, which in turn has helped our telco and ISP customers to be able to control their cost base out to their subscribers. And finally, you know, we've mentioned DreamHost in the US, who were instrumental in helping us on this journey. We're also very fortunate to have an OpenStack partner in EU. So we have a data center in Frankfurt. We have several thousands of customers on that already. In fact, I know that our team are doing another small migration next week of around 30,000 users. And we are also opening a data center in Asia Pac as well. So that's effectively what the OpenStack methodology and adopting that for us has meant as a company. So what I want to do is to conclude that there. We're now happy to take any questions off the floor that you may have. Does anyone have anything they would like to ask either of myself or JB or of atmail in general?
What is the mailbox technology you are using now? What is the mailbox backend?
So just to repeat that question, what is the mailbox technology that we're using now? Okay.
We're using Dovecot to store that, and right now we're using Maildir format, and we're looking at dbox and some other.
You're using the shared file system?
Yes, yes.
Sorry, JB, could you just repeat the question for the?
Yeah, we're using the shared file system for the Maildir structure.
Any other questions from anyone else? No? Well, in that case, what we'll do is, if you do have anything further that you think of at a later date, please either stop myself or JB if you come across us in the summit, either today or tomorrow. All that remains now is to thank you very much for listening. We appreciate you being here today. Thanks again to the organizers for allowing us this opportunity to speak to you. Enjoy the rest of your day, enjoy the rest of the OpenStack Summit, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.